Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be creating a kiosk using a Linux operating system. There are a variety of methods you can go about this. A lot of people tend to go with Windows operating systems. I opted to create one with Linux for a few reasons, and I specifically chose the Ubuntu 22.04 LTS distribution server edition for a few reasons. Specifically, I went with the server edition because, and it's the minimal version of the server edition, so it basically strips away a whole bunch of unnecessary packages that we know we won't need for sure. And then I opted to add the packages that I knew I would need or I thought I would need, which then contributes to a very small footprint of an operating system. It also assists with hardening the system, essentially because if you don't have a package on there that could be a security vulnerability, it's not an attack vector for other people. And at the same time, there's less applications that could potentially cause issues or instability with the system. I also opted for the GNOME skinned UI. Again, I opted to go for that because it has a large community following. Right now, Ubuntu is based off of GNOME, the desktop version at least. So there is a broad community support for it. So that being said, why don't I go ahead and get started here, and I can show you guys what I did. So first things first, I'm just going to confirm here for you guys. LSB. As I said, I've already installed the Linux server for version 22.04.1, and this is the minimal installation, so a lot of applications won't actually be on here by default. But we will go ahead and add them. As you can see here, I'm just confirming the information I was just telling you a few minutes ago. I don't see this being an issue with the LTS versions before this, so 20.04 should work the same way, although I haven't tested it before this. I'm also doing this on a virtual machine for the time being, so it was going to be a little slower. I have tested this in the wild with hardware, with physical hardware, so I've specifically used the Asus PN50, both the Intel and AMD versions. They are able to run 4K video with no stress, so we're talking about 4 gigs of memory, and the CPU usage is at around 3%, so both the Intel and the AMD versions. I'm not going to go into how you would want to add GPU drivers on the system. That would probably be something for another video, and it's very specific. It tends to be very specific to the type of video graphics card that you have on your machine. But if there's enough interest, I can definitely go ahead and create another video showing everything I added to an Asus PN50. This is more of a generic instruction as to how to create a kiosk from the get-go. These steps would be the essential steps you would have to follow on any machine that you want to go about creating this version of a kiosk. Again, with Linux, there's a variety of ways of doing this. My way isn't the only way, and I'm sure that some people could think of better ways of doing this, but this is the way that I went about it, and I think it would work very well for most people. So let's go ahead and get started here. The first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to go ahead and install what I believe and what I usually install as a base for any Ubuntu server edition that I work with. So let's go ahead and do that. Apt-get install -y. I've already written these out beforehand, so I'm just going to copy them, and I'll just very briefly discuss why I installed all these. So I'm going to put these on here. I use Screen for having different TTY sessions running at the same time. Not needed for everyone. This is more of a preference for me. Vim is what I use for my text editor. rsync is a tool that I'm sure many of you would be familiar with for transferring data back and forth. I'm going to skip over CA certificates here, not really needed. GNUPG for repositories, lsb-release is also something that I tend to use. Curl you'll use for downloading of packages, downloading of zip files that you'll see further on as we do shell extensions in here. Cron, you're going to need that. It's not installed in the minimal edition, and a few other ones here. I opted for Nano. I put it on here just because I know a lot of people are comfortable with Nano when they're fresh out the gate with using Linux. I personally don't use it a whole lot, but I will try to remember to use it for the purposes of this video for people who aren't familiar with Vim or VI, and we'll go from there. So as you can see, I did a -y at the beginning here, so it's not going to ask me if I'm sure I want to install these. So let's go ahead and press OK, and we're going to let that go through. And oh, it looks like, so like I said, this is a virtual machine, and it's running. It's been running for a while, and I haven't done an update of the repository. So let's go ahead and do that first, and that should be quick. Okay, that's that. Let's go ahead and do that install. So this is installing all those basic packages that I was saying. All right, that should be wrapping up soon here. And I guess just to give a little bit of heads up, so I have the console up here, and the purpose for that is so that you guys can see what the UI will look like once we finish installing it. I'm not going to put any of the commands really in here just because this is a VNC console, so copying and pasting is a little weird, I guess we could say. I'm opting for using an SSH connection. I didn't put that as part of the instructions on here. I assume you would know how to do that, but if you don't, you know, by all means, you can definitely put some comments in the video, and I could do follow-up to this video with any steps that I may have left out that I would have thought were not needed. So let's go ahead and as you can see here at the bottom, it's asking me to confirm that I want to restart these services after all those packages were installed. Typically speaking, I just press enter here, and I let it restart those if they're needed, and it gets me back to the command line here, so I can start entering my next set of commands in here. So the next step I want to go with is actually installing the packages for GNOME, along with supporting applications such as Chromium-browser, Firefox, MPV, and the reason why I opted for all those is the kiosks that I've built. I typically use Chromium-browser. I don't use Google Chrome. That way it's not linked to Google. It's not something that would be needed. But Chromium-browser is what Google Chrome is based off of. And Firefox I have on there as well, just as a failsafe if people want to opt for a Firefox kiosk versus a Chromium-browser. It's really user preference. The commands don't really change a whole lot. MPV is what I use for video. There are other applications you can choose, such as VLC, CVLC, and a few others that I can't think off the top of my head. But essentially, the reason why I opted for MPV is it has a very scaled back UI. If you are running it through command line or at boot, it's just going to load the video and no other fluff to it, which I think is great for the purposes of a kiosk. So I'm just going to go ahead and move forward here. Here's the command I'm running, and again, just to give a little bit of a rough instruction as to why I've opted for this. So apt-get install-y. This is for installing the packages, gnome-session, terminal, and dconf-editor. Dconf-editor, and you'll have to forgive me if some of my terminology isn't right, if some of you are hardcore experts for dconf and gnome, please go ahead and correct me in the instructions. A lot of this was based on my research when I was building this a while back. But dconf-editor, typically speaking, what I would use it for is for configuring certain environment customizations within the GNOME sessions. gnome-tweaks, this is something else that you'll see once the UI is up, will be very helpful for things such as shell extensions. And again, you're seeing there mkdir, chromium-browser, and firefox, and the chrome-gnome-shell as well. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter here. This part here will take a little longer on my virtual machine. Your mileage will vary as to speed. It depends on how fast the system you have is to install these packages. So let's go ahead and press enter here, and we will let that run. Now, while this is installing, just to give a little more background information as to why I opted for creating a scaled back GNOME UI as opposed to just creating a single application GNOME session. While I'm quite comfortable creating that for myself, I know that the people that would be using these machines, or the people that will would be supporting this in the wild, may not be fully familiar with the Linux UI specifically for GNOME. So by giving them something that looks familiar with a activities screen and application view of what's on there so that they can click through it to troubleshoot. That's the reason why I opted for going down this road. You know, again, in the future, I may create another video that shows how to create a single session application GNOME session. So if you can imagine, it would boot up and that would be the only application there. The other reason why I went down this road is because these kiosks also have to be versatile. So depending on the usage, it would be a Chrome web page that's loaded via browser, or that same machine could also function as a video that's being put on loop, which is where mkdir comes in. The same app machine can do either or. It's just a matter of changing the startup commands for the user once it logs in. So those are the reasons why I went down that road. Again, this is one of the great things about the Linux operating system is you can really configure it to your liking. Okay, so as you can see there, the installation for the basic UI is now complete. Again, it's asking me, hey, do you want to restart these services after we're done here? I'm just going to press enter. I don't really need anything to be restarted right now. I know that you don't see the UI up here yet. And that's because we haven't started it, and we'll get to that in just a moment. I'm just going to move forward here and make sure we have a few more things set up before I go down that road. So that being said, the next thing that you want to do is we want to create a user that will be for the kiosk itself. So what we do is we just go ahead and user add -m for it to create a home directory -s -s. Now I just have a preference for bash as my shell. You don't need to do that. I just prefer it just because I like the autocomplete and all that from within the profile for bash in Ubuntu 22.04, basically any of the Ubuntu versions. And then I just called my login screen. You can call it whatever you want, just make sure you remember what name it is. So let's go ahead and press enter there, and that's done. And we should see here screen. So this is the user that we've created. So what we want is we're going to want, when the machine starts up, or when GNOME specifically starts up, you want it to log that user in automatically. And as you can see, we have not provided that user with a password. And that's for a few reasons. One, for security. So that essentially means that this user, number one, they're not sudo, so they don't have the ability to really change much. And if they try to do anything, they don't have a password to go anywhere. So the only users that really have any power and authority would be whoever you deem to be your sudo. So I put there bkmorale. That's just a user I tend to use on my test machines, test benches. But that's the one I use for sudo. And test right now is, well, it's just a test user. That's irrelevant. We can ignore that. So now that the user is created, we now want to edit GNOME so that we have it automatically log this user in. So we're going to go ahead and go to etc. So cd /etc /jdm3. And then in here, if I ls, you'll see a custom.conf file, which is this one right here. That's the one we're going to edit. So in line with what I was saying before, I would typically use vi, but that's not a problem. We can go ahead and use nano. I know a lot of people are very comfortable with nano. So I'll go ahead and press enter here. And down here, you're going to see enable automatic login. So that's something we definitely want to do. So within the configuration file, we're just going to go ahead and remove that hash, and we're leaving it as automatic login enabled to true. And then the second line here, automatic login, it's basically asking us, well, what user do you want me to log you in? Well, if you remember before, I created the screen user. So that's the one I'm going to use here. And once I'm done there, I'm going to press Control X, and then it's going to ask me, hey, are you sure you want to save this file? I'm going to say yes. And we're going to press enter, and that's done. And we can confirm that if we use cat custom.conf, you'll see here it's no longer hashed out. Okay, so this is going to take effect. Now, what does that look like? Let's go ahead and start the GNOME session. So systemctl, and we're going to enable first JDM3. Now this means that whenever the machine starts up, it'll automatically start the GNOME session. Okay. The next thing that we want to do is systemctl start JDM3. Now this is going to start it. So if you look at the other side of my screen here, you're going to see now up here that the GNOME session is going to start, and there it is. So what user am I logged in with? Well, as you remember, I said before, we set it to automatically log in the screen user. And if I go ahead and restart this machine, it's going to take me there. So the lion's share of the work is now done. Now we're just going to configure this a little bit. So let's move forward here. Again, there are a variety of ways to start applications on boot. For the sake of ease and for the sake of this video, I'm going to show you what would conceivably be the easiest way to do this. It's not necessarily the best way. It's not necessarily wrong. It's just one way. Personally, I would either go down the road of creating a systemctl file or a script to do this, but that's just a preference. It's not really better than. So to show you again, if I go to the activities overview here, if we go to the bottom here, show applications, and we see these startup applications. So here, we're going to go ahead and tell it, hey, this is what I want you to start on boot. So again, I'm going to do start browser on boot. Now, we'll command. So as you remember what I was saying earlier, you can choose Firefox or Chrome or any browser that you choose, even if it's Google Chrome, if that's what you want to use. I opted for Chromium, which is the open source version. It'll work just the same. So what do we do? Okay, so chromium-browser. And just make sure I spelled that right. Yeah, it looks right to me. And then we're going to do space -- kiosk. So that's going to start it up in kiosk mode. Okay. And then we pick a URL. And I'll just go ahead and use my own. Consulting.ca. Again, this is where you would put the name of your URL, whatever it is that you want to launch at boot. And you don't have that a comment. I'm just going to put one here. Start my web page on boot. And we're going to click on add. Okay, so now that's there. Now, two ways we can test this. I can reboot the whole machine, or I can just restart the GNOME session. I'll go ahead and restart it just because it's easier and quicker. So I do a restart, and let's give it a second here. And it is the first time we're launching Chromium on this machine, and do remember that this is a virtual machine, so it's not the fastest thing in the world. But it will bring it up here, and it will automatically go to that page. Let me make sure that I spelled this right, because it should have launched by now. And I have been known to make a mistake or two. Let me change that here. Let's see here, chromium, Chromium-browser. And then we're going to save that. And let me just test this now, because I have a feeling that I misspelled that. That's the only reason that wouldn't work. Yeah, I didn't spell that right. So, Chromium-browser, it's right here. So let me go ahead and modify that here. Good old copy paste. And let's test out that script again, or that command. And look, it's going to work this time. So yeah, it was definitely a typo. Otherwise, it wouldn't hang there. And there it is. So let's test this out. So I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, I'm going to restart the GNOME session. And it will bring it up, and it brings it up much quicker now. So that is essentially 90% of the work. So as you can see, we have a glaring issue here where we have this activities overview coming up. Now, when I was building these kiosk machines, I consider this a bit of a bug within the GNOME UI, where it doesn't allow you to disable this outright. What you need to do is you need to add a shell extension. I actually reached out to the GNOME community and the developers, and I said, "Hey, is there any way you guys are looking to add this as a way to turn off this overview?" It doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon. But they did confirm after the research I did, and they kind of corroborated we can use this shell extension. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that right now. Now, I'm going to get you to focus back to my SSH session here, and we're going to go ahead and create the directory where this is going to go. There's two ways you can go about doing this. One, you can do this at the user level, or you can do this system-wide. I'm going to show you how to do it system-wide just because the assumption I'm running on is that any user that you have logging in here, whether it's the screen user or a admin user, you don't really care for this activities overview. If you want to do it on a per user basis, again, I can create a follow-up video for that. That's not a problem. So let's go ahead and move forward here. So I'm going to do an mkdir. We're going to create a directory. I'm going to do -p. So it's essentially telling the system create any directory that's missing as part of this path. So we're going to go user, and then we're going to go to share, and then no, and then -shell, and extensions. And then the name of this shell extension is no overview. So let me just copy and paste this here. mkdir -p, and this is the full path. Okay. So if I go ahead and cd to this directory, there's nothing in here. Obviously, we have to put something in here. And the name of this shell extension, I'm going to go ahead and use this to show you guys what it looks like. Open up another window. Okay, and then I'm going to do no shell extensions, and no overview. And then this one's developed, it says at fthx. This is the one that I used. Okay. You can download it from here manually. Again, for the sake of this video, I already have the path because I've used this before. So I'm going to go ahead and download this. And I should be able to use wget, but if not, I can use curl. Yeah, and this is the path where I want to put it. Again, you can download this wherever you want. The same rules apply. So I'm going to do wget, and I'm going to download it. I'm doing version 13. And there it is. So if you remember before, one of the packages that we installed was unzip. And the reason for that is because now we're going to unzip this file. So unzip, no overview, and we got 2 files out of it. And if we do an ls-al, that's the extensions.js and metadata.json. We don't need the zip file anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that just to keep it clean. And there we go. We have the 2 files, and they are in that path that I had said earlier. So the user shared gnome-shell extensions, no overview at fthx. Okay. Now we want to change permissions for these just to make it nice and clean. And that's shmod space 644. And we're going to do everything in this directory. Okay. And that's that. So once that's done, now watch this. I'm going to, actually before I go ahead and restart GNOME, I'm going to get rid of all these browsers. Oh. And we're going to quit. Okay. So if I do systemctl restart JDM3. Now, even though we've put it in here, it is not executing it, and the reason for that is we haven't enabled it. You can enable it system-wide via the command line. I'm not showing you that here just because, again, I know that some of the audience is not quite comfortable with the command line, and then it'll just be easier, especially if you're doing 1 or 2 machines, just to go here to the show applications, extensions, and we'll give it a moment for that to come up. And there it is. And here is the no overview at startup. If I go ahead and enable that, okay, I'm going to go ahead and restart the JDM session one more time. And before I do that, let me get rid of these applications again so that you can see. There we go. Oh. So you can see what it looks like when it boots. Okay, let's do this one more time. Restart. And as you can see, the no overview did not come up, and it loaded up the browser with the URL all on its own. And as you can see, there's no way to really click around anything else other than this site. Now, you can modify that command to, say, for example, not do Kiosk if you want people to have the ability to navigate to various other websites, or if you want to do a video, you can use something like MPV. And in a follow-up video, I can show what commands I use for the MPV. Again, your mileage will vary based on what you're looking to do. And that essentially wraps up how you want to create this kiosk. Just to prove that everything's working as it should, if you look on my SSH session here, I'm going to go ahead and restart this machine. Okay. Okay, so that's my SSH session is gone, and as you can see here on the VNC now, this machine is now in the process of booting up. Again, this is just using 4 CPUs and 4 gigs of RAM. You don't need that much. You can actually get away with less to do something like this on a video. If your machine has a GPU, you won't even be using the CPU anyways for video rendering. Again, in the wild, I've been able to have these machines running on 8 gigs of RAM, 4 CPU, and we're using less than 13% resources for memory, and CPUs less than 3%. As you can see here, the reboot has finished. The activities overview is not coming up, and the browser just came up all on its own. Okay, so if anyone has any questions, please put them in the comments. That'll help me mold any future videos that I'm looking to do. I'm looking to primarily focus on using the open source ecosystem to support clients. I'm part of a managed service solution organization, and we manage a lot of small, mid-sized organizations, and it's projects like these that really make the difference for them, where no longer are they tied into licensing for, say, Windows. I know that a lot of these little nooks don't have TPM, so now these difficult decisions of whether or not you're going to use or be able to upgrade to Windows 11 is out of the question, because we're using Ubuntu in this case. Furthermore, patching is a lot simpler. Security is no longer as big of an issue because our footprint is much smaller. As you can see, there are very few applications installed on here, and you can definitely scale this back even more. Again, this was just to get everyone out the door and started down the path of using in a Linux-based kiosk system. So thank you for watching. If this worked for you, give me a thumbs up. And if you want to send something my way, I will have my Bitcoin wallet there. And look forward to hearing from you guys. Thank you very much.